right there. I'm getting my boy, the one and only Mr. Maz. This is my boy right here.
Hey,
Go
what's
ahead,
up, you
man.
guys, man? Hey, Scoop, man. First and foremost, man, I just appreciate your the way you speak, the way you communicate.
Thank
That's refreshing as a reporter.
Thank
When you talk, man, it's like your words speak volume, and I can tell that you come from a good place. And the main thing is what you always said, from my point of view, which means that you take accountability. So I like that about you, man.
Thank
So listen, man, I'm a diehard Rockets fan, right? I
you.
kind of want to ask you about Kobe being Bryant, but then I'll pass on that.
You can.
Um,
What you want?
oh,
You should
okay,
know.
okay.
We just
Okay,
let
cool, man.
people know.
Okay, so then two questions then. Can you talk about the late 2000 Rockets when they had Yao, Artest, Shane, Carl Landry? You had Aaron Brooks. How dominant was that team? And my main question is, how dominant was Yao Ming? Because he's a big guy who kind of gets overlooked, but from a skill set standpoint, he had everything you wanted in a big guy, right? And then my second question was, can you just give a quick story where you saw Kobe being Bryant up close and personal, and you were like, this don't make no sense. Like, this dude is amazing. I mean, why is Kobe Bryant overlooked? I mean, why are we putting guys at MJ and they just leapfrog Kobe being Bryant? I can't comprehend that. So I mean, that's what I'm asking you.
So you asked a lot. So
I'm
I'm gonna
sorry, my bad.
stop apologizing. I'm gonna answer every single question. So the first
Okay.
question was about Aaron Brooks, Yao Ming, Ron Artest. What I can say specifically to that is Yao Ming. I'll speak to that. I feel like Yao Ming is in a situation that's similar to like Bobo and Kristaps Porzingis. And hear me out. Sometimes you just tall as shit, and you don't always, even though you're tall, you have to grow into that from a basketball perspective. I feel like the transition from playing in China to playing in the US, that's any adjustment. I mean, for me, like I can think of being the new kid in school. I went to a lot of different schools growing up, and I was always the new kid on the block. And so think about that from a basketball perspective. You got to play with guys who the American game is a lot different than the international game. It's a bigger transition from the international game to the American game than it is from playing AAU or high school basketball to playing in the NBA. I also think that up and down in the 82 game schedule is a lot, not just for Yao, but it was a lot for international people. I think that's why you're hearing people discuss that now, with people discussing shortening the seasons. Um, I also just think that people put a lot of pressure on Yao competing with Shaq. And looking back on Shaq and his whole, it felt like when Shaq and Yao were going, when they were pitting those two against each other. The NBA is
Mhm.
the big storytelling machine, the big this versus this. It's like Zangief versus Guile, right? It feels like the Russian guy and Rocky versus Apollo Creed. It's always versus, and I feel like Shaq and Yao just had two different styles of play, and I feel like with Aaron Brooks and Meta World Peace. I mean, I know Meta has often talked about his time in Houston and has always spoken reverently about it. I just think, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that just Kobe's time?
Well, Scoot B, I mean, I recall before Yao broke his foot in game three, when Kobe got Pau Gasol that first year, Houston took game one, right? And then it went 7 games, and Yao broke his foot, and then that ruined everything. And
Right.
then in that game seven, you saw Kobe's greatness, come to fruition. Transition. Can you transition into Kobe? Give a moment where you saw him up close and personal, and just can you talk about the skill set, the footwork, the left hand, right
So,
hand, the mid range, everything.
so a couple things. One, Kobe is an alum of Lower Merion High School. Um, I went to school literally down the street from. I went to college, literally about 10 minutes from Lower Merion on the main line. So I went to college with people who were alum of Lower Merion, and the first thing that stood out to me about that school was um, hearing stories about Kobe, and what time he got to school in the morning to work out, and how much of a grown man he was at 17 and 18, and he realized his potential. That's one. Two, I actually spent time with his father in Dallas, Texas, back in 2014. I was at a basketball exposure program in Dallas, and Jelly's hotel room was right across the hall from my hotel room. And I would just be knocking on his door or riding in the car headed to the gym. And I was just a sponge. Like, Jelly told me about this time that, so I don't know if you know this. One thing that Kobe and his dad have in common are Del Harris coached Jelly in Houston, and Del Harris coached Kobe in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And Jelly told me about a time that he came to LA to check on Kobe, and Del Harris pulled him to the side and said, "Y'all both have something in common." He said, "What?" "Y'all both hard-headed."
Right.
And that kind of stood out to me because it's there's a like father like son dynamic more than you realize. You asked me specifically about his footwork, so I don't know if everybody knows this. Jelly was a big man, and I watched Jelly work out with some of these guys. Like this exposure program, it was people from Toronto, it was people from New Orleans, it was people from Houston, it was people from Newark, New Jersey, it was people from San Antonio, it was people from like all these guys came to see all these players, you know, to just get better. And I watched Jelly's footwork. And when I saw Jelly's footwork, I just saw Kobe wearing white and gold sneakers like he was in the 2010 NBA Finals.
Yes, sir.
I was like, to see Kobe is to see Jelly. This guy got it. So you talk about just, you know, getting to know the dad, getting to know, and then also getting to know Kobe. I didn't get into that yet. It made so much sense. Like I talk about the fact that in radio, I started at 12. Jelly told me he sees the similarities as a child prodigy with me starting when I started and seeing his son start when he started. And he called me a nerd. He said, just studying tape, studying this. When you look at Kobe Bryant's history, he literally, not only being a second generation basketball player, but watching his dad live the life and his dad playing for the Sixers and more. He was the independent study on what it took to not only be better than your dad, but also to be an elite basketball player because he studied the European game. He watched his dad play, and he was put in position to see the Magics, to see the Dr. J's, to see the Michaels, to watch tape of Isaiah, to watch tape of Larry Bird, to watch tape of Magic. Like he basically had the ability to learn the game before he even played the game. So by the time he got on the court, he was going at everybody because he watched their tape and watched their moves. He is the bookworm, but he's also not only the academic, but he's the practitioner. And so I think just all of those things, just being around his dad, I learned a lot. My fondest memory of Kobe, two I have, if I may. One, I started in radio, as I told you, at 12 doing radio for the Nets. I had a show on New York radio. And my mom, my late mom, she I was at school. I stepped out to go to the nurse's office to call my mom. And she said, "Brandon, if you call this house one more time, you're not going to the Lakers game tonight." Right? So I hit *67 to block the number. And I call her back. "Hello?" And I hung up. So I get home. I'm like, "Come on, Mom, you ready to go?" She said, "To what?" I said, "To the Nets Lakers game." She said, "You're not going." I said, "Why?" She said, "It's because you pressed *67 to call the house one more time. I'm not stupid." I didn't get a chance to see Shaq and Kobe play that night because I was playing on the phone, right? I did get a chance later in life to get to know Kobe, and my fondest memory of him was in 2016, his last All-Star game in Toronto. And if you remember, a week or so prior to that, Peyton Manning and the Broncos won that Super Bowl. And I asked Kobe, would it be cool to ride out into the sunset, similar to the way that Peyton Manning did it? He goes, I called him an elder statesman. He said, "That's not elder statesman. It would have been great to ride out into the sunset like that." He goes, and he pauses. He goes, "But I've also won to the tune of this many championships. I've done this. I've done that. So, you know, I'm glad that I was able to take the good with the bad. But, you know, ultimately, you know, I did what I needed to do." And he closed out that year scoring that mega points against, you know, the Utah Jazz. I think for Kobe, one of the main reason why people are closing the gap between he and LeBron, meaning LeBron and Michael, is because Kobe is not here, God rest the dead, to defend himself. I think that LeBron is this kid. Hear me out when I say this, because y'all gonna take this and run. For this era, LeBron is the Michael Jordan of this era. He's not Michael Jordan. He is the face of the league. And because he's the face of the league, and because Michael was the face of the league back then, people are going to easily compare. LeBron is still active. Michael was the GOAT for that era. Kobe is not here to defend himself. But
I got one last point, short time, and I promise, bro, I'll be fast. Stuart B, man, my passion was radio. I mean, I eat, sleep, drink, you know, sports radio, right? And so I'm in Sacramento, and so I used to go on this KXTK 1140 for the Sacramento Kings flagship station. You know, Doug Christie, Grant Napier, Damon Barley, and I learned quick that it's hard to be yourself and be authentic because sometimes they want to push a certain narrative. They would send me emails saying, "We're talking about this today," and of course, me being young and hard-headed, when I go live on the air and the FCC airways, you know, I just go, you know, all the way. I just let loose, and so. My last question, and then I'm gonna let Showtime move on. How do you still be authentic and get your point across and have an opinion and not be persuaded, you know, with the popular opinion as a reporter? Because sometimes, you know, look, can we be honest? Some reporters have agendas, they have narratives, they have friendships, and it gets in the way of the reporting. To me, you give off a very authentic vibe, and so I appreciate that. How do you stay true to that moving forward?
Don't be afraid to be the conductor in a classical orchestra and turn your back to the crowd. What am I saying? Don't be afraid to be yourself, because there's a million everybody else's. There's only one you.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with developing a style. Like, yo, I'll be honest with you. I'm not who I'm supposed to be yet. I still got a lot of work to do, but I know who I am. But the one thing that stays consistent in everything that I've said to you in this conversation, whether you love me, you hate me, you come on here and to go in the comments to troll me, the one thing that has been constant and authentic throughout is that I have a love for basketball. I have a love for the state of New Jersey. I have a love for the city of New York. And I have a love for culture. And let that be seen through and through. But you also have to do the work to be respected locally. And I think that writing, as much as people want to be on TV and as much as people want to be heard on radio, you still got to be a good writer if you hope to attribute those things. And so I think that if you attach yourself to your local market and you build your stuff up, that will become national. I'll say this to you, and I'll finish. I graduated grad school in 2011, and as I mentioned previously, just telling my story, I lived in my grandmother's basement, and ultimately, I freelanced at about 10 to 12 different publications. I had a food stamp card in my back pocket, and when I could get work as an adjunct professor, I did, and I was collecting unemployment. But ultimately, I attached myself to local markets, and that was attaching myself to certain people who were success stories, and covering Jabril Peppers, who's now on the Giants, when he was in high school before he went to Michigan. And, you know, when he was in high school, I covered him on the local level at the East Orange Record newspaper. I covered Kyrie Irving before LeBron came back to Cleveland at the West Orange Chronicle. None of those newspapers could get in touch with him, but I could. And what ended up happening was the more and more I got those clips, I was able to pitch to bigger stories and bigger publications. It's not a magic that gets done, but it's utilizing what you have to get to where you want to be. And it's a process.
Well, I salute you, man. And I appreciate you taking your time out, showing Showtime love, man, showing myself love, just having an old-fashioned basketball conversation, man. I mean, I could do this shit all day, Scoop, man. I love it, bro. Thank you, man. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Hey man, we're gonna get two more